Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Tom Rosenberger, Interim Assistant Dean and Director of Online Programs here at Albany Law School. We're happy to have you today. Today's webinar is part of our HR and Practice series, serving aspiring professionals from early ladder climbers through policy leaders who are working in or adjacent to the human resources field. Just a few quick housekeeping items before we get started today. Closed captioning is available. You can adjust the appearance of it at the bottom of your webinar screen. This webinar is being recorded and we will be sharing the recording with all attendees in the following days. We'll also be sharing it, in case you don't see the email, we'll also be sharing it on social media, including LinkedIn. The law school, just as a quick note, does provide a lot of public programming and events, and we share those all mostly via LinkedIn is a great place, including our new Women's Leadership Initiative. A lot of analysis and perspective on hot topics from our law faculty and opportunities and projects taking place in our in-house public interest law firm, the Justice Center. For today's webinar, the Q&A function is available in case you have a question. However, I will warn you that the speakers have prepared a very robust set of topics and have a lot of insight to share with you. So they may just take one or two questions at the very end of the hour. And finally, after participating in today's webinar, we do encourage you to fill out our quick survey, which my colleague Nicole will be putting in the chat panel and will also be made available when you leave today's webinar. This helps us refine our programming and also to plan future topics that are truly of value to you. Today's webinar is put on in conjunction with the Capital Region HR Association, recognized by SHRM, the Society for Human Resources Management, as well as HRCI. Professional development certificates will be sent out to all attendees in the next few days, along with the recording link to the webinar. The Capital Region HR Association offers opportunities for learning and networking through their weekly newsletter, events, and a whole lot more. You can email them at info@crhra.org for information about how to get involved. And we also want to let you know quickly that Albany Law offers a number of fully online graduate programs that serve professionals looking to advance their careers. Our programs are designed to be flexible with the adult learner in mind. We know you may be looking to advance your degree through education, but may already have a busy life, and our programming is designed around that. Our courses take a practical approach, and our faculty are current industry experts and professionals whose personal insights are among the things that our students say they value the most. Last January, we launched a new human resources law leadership and policy program, which is aligned with the Society for Human Resources Management, SHRM. Like all of our programs, it's offered in a 9-credit advanced graduate certificate model, a 30-credit master's for those with or without any legal background, and a 24-credit LLM for attorneys looking to better apply their expertise of the law to a particular field, the HR field. The LLM can be completed in as little as 12 months and the master's in a little over a year. Our other programs are cybersecurity and data privacy, health law and healthcare compliance, financial compliance and risk management, and launching in spring 2022, a brand new program in government affairs and advocacy, which we are thrilled about. If you want to learn more about any of our programs or just have a chat with us, please give us a call at 518-443-5260 or email graduateadmissions@albanylaw.edu. And if you are serious about getting started with us, we do have 6 terms throughout the calendar year. Students can begin in any one of those terms. So the next application deadline coming up for the fall 1 term is Monday, August 16th. If you are interested in starting, you got to get your complete application in by then, and we can also waive the application fee for you. So in terms of this webinar series, our next event will be Wednesday, August 18th, 1 to 2 p.m. And it'll be a forum of Chief Human Resources Officers, discussing HR strategy, challenges, and trends in the post-pandemic world. As always, you can find out more and register on Albany Law's events page on our website. Without further ado, let me introduce you to today's 2 speakers on the topic Disney and HR, Operationalizing Human Resources Strategy to Maximize Business Results. We're really thrilled to have Christopher Caracci, organizational change consultant at Christopher James Associates, LLC, and a 30-year veteran with the Walt Disney Company and the Disney Institute. Chris is an expert in organizational culture and leadership and has worked with clients worldwide to provide their organizational culture, improve their organizational cultures based on the time-tested legacy practices of the Walt Disney Company. These efforts involve the development of service delivery frameworks and methodologies, re-engineering human resource practices, and revitalizing approaches to leadership management and succession, all in an effort to impact business results through the operationalization of human resources best practice. Welcome, Chris. Also joining us is James Boswell. Among his many accomplishments, we are proud to have him as an adjunct professor on our online graduate programs. James has spent 30 years working at the intersection of law, business, and government. James is a principal consultant for a firm assisting businesses with organizational culture change, including leadership excellence, employee engagement, quality service, and sustainable results in various industries, including higher education and healthcare. He also serves on the faculty of the Business School at the College of William and Mary. Welcome, James, and please take it away.
Tom, thanks very much for that kind introduction, and thank you for hosting this program today. In my work here at Albany Law School and at the Business School at William and Mary, and in my consulting practice, I talk about so many examples of best practices from the Walt Disney Company in all aspects of business, but especially from Disney's human resource strategy. So I'm really excited to be part of this today and getting to speak with Chris Caracci, a Disney veteran. Tom, you said of 30 years, I'll say of over 2 decades. Chris, welcome, and thank you for joining us today to discuss Disney's HR strategy. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience with the Walt Disney Company?
Well, first, it's a pleasure to be with you today and to sort of pull the curtain back on some of Disney's best practices when it comes to human resources and human resource strategy. I will begin by saying, before I introduce myself, that nothing I say today is rocket science. It's all very foundational and fundamental. The key is just sticking to it and doing it every day and trying to do it better as the days go by. I started my career with Disney in Florida at our Walt Disney World property. For those of you not familiar with that, that's in Central Florida. It is the largest of the Disney resort and park properties around the world. It hosts anywhere, this fluctuates all the time, between 70 and 90,000 employees work on that site and is considered to be one of the largest single site employers in Florida in North America. I was based there and began my work there actually in parks at the Magic Kingdom Park in 1988 in operations in the park. Was there just a few years before I took a leave of absence and went back to school. I went to school in Europe, graduate school in Europe, earning a master's degree in leadership, came back to the US and immediately onboarded back to the Walt Disney Company at Walt Disney World in Florida into the Disney University. The Disney University is the name that we have for our internal learning and training and development organism within Disney. All of our training, all of our orientation, all of our ongoing training, compliance training, all of it happens within the confines of Disney University and the teams there that make all of that happen. And as I said, supporting a cast group, an employee group of between 70 and 90,000 people on an annual basis with that. I worked for the Disney University primarily in leadership development, but certainly touched on orientation, which the Disney University also had responsibility for. So new employee orientation, compliance training, line of business training, leadership training. It really was an entire catalog of offerings that the university ran. Worked for Disney University until 2000, and then made a large pivot from internal training to external training, and went to work for the Disney Institute, which is the external training, learning, development division of the Walt Disney Company and based out of Florida. So went to taking all of our knowledge, if you will, especially around human resource practice and around our culture at Disney, and translating that for external audiences. And for the next 20 years, beginning in 2000, I worked extensively with organizations around the world in a variety of different industries, from healthcare to manufacturing, banking, retail, just about every industry that you can possibly imagine, and help them to adapt some of Disney's best business practices for their own business, for their own industry. Because when they came to us, when they came to Disney Institute, they all seek to this day, they seek the same thing. And that is to improve their cultures so that at the end of the day, they can deliver the best service experiences, customer service experiences to all those people that they serve. Whether they're providing a service or providing a product, the goal is to provide the best experience possible. So I enjoyed that career of 20 years with the Disney Institute, and the Disney Institute is still going strong, but sharing those best practices not only in North America, but around the world. Today, I hope to share with you as much as possible what some of that strategy at Disney looks like internally, the things we used to teach or I taught at Disney Institute to our external clients, and why that makes such a difference in the success of your company and the financial results that your company attains year over year. So with that, I'll hand it back to Professor Boswell.
So Chris, thank you for that. That's a wonderful background. Disney's reputation, as I think everybody knows, the reputation around customer service is world class and has been for over half a century. It's a remarkable record. Can you describe to us how the Disney strategy around HR is engineered to keep customer service at that high level and to keep customer service central?
Yes, service is central at Disney and has been central for the last half century. I need to take you back to the time of Walt Disney himself. Walt Disney knew, he was very keen on being aware that the products and the things that he created or innovated in all those years, he knew that to try to differentiate your business simply on those products or those services was not sustainable long term. He knew that something else had to go with the product delivery, and that was the service delivery, so the customer service delivery. This is still a critical element to the culture today, and an element that I shared through all my years at Disney Institute with our clients is that service is often the things people take for granted when they're interacting with an organization, but it's the first thing that they notice when something goes wrong. And especially when you're in an organization that has a high brand value, it's an organization where the quality of the product or the quality of the service, like Disney, is already very high. Your customer makes an assumption when they interact with you that they're going to get a quality product or a quality service. So the wild card becomes the customer service that they encounter in the process of consuming that product or service that you're offering. Walt Disney recognized this very early on, and he knew that it was important to focus everyone working with him. And he's been gone a long time now, but we still hold to these same truths in the company. He's been gone since 1966, but he was focused on making sure that the experience for the customer interacting with us was always the most thoughtful, the most mindful, and the most detail-oriented that it could possibly be. Because we knew, and he knew, that eventually people would start replicating our products, they would replicate our experiences, but he knew that if we kept on top of this service piece, that would be the piece that would ultimately differentiate us. And it still does. To this day, Disney service is known worldwide as being the finest and of the highest class. For him, in order to focus people, even in those early years, on the centricity of this service delivery, he knew that he had to appeal and it was very much an emotional connection. He had to appeal to the employees that worked for him to want to come to work to make a difference for the customers that they were seeing every day in their experiences, even internal customers that they were seeing every day in their employment experience with us. And in order to do that, he had to take some things that we know all too well in human resources, visions and missions and vision statements and all of that. And he had to really boil it down to what made a difference in the employee's experience. And that thing, and I'll continue to talk about that today in our time together, that thing was called purpose, as we say at Disney, our common purpose. It was all that we do, it was all that we stand for, boiled down to something that everyone, no matter what role they were playing in the organization or what job they had or what tasks they did every day, it was something that everyone could engage in and participate in. And I'll tell you, the short version of that common purpose for Disney is we create happiness. That is what we ultimately do, all of us across all the divisions of the company. We create happiness. And if you can get your people to engage in that purpose, which is very emotional, there's an emotional connection there, then they can, with the direction of the organization, internalize what that creation of happiness looks like in their individual roles. Walt Disney started that, even though he may not have had a complete framework around that. The idea of that he started way back in the 1950s when we opened Disneyland in California in 1955. And he knew that long term that would be the thing that people would keep coming back to us for year after year. And to this day, it is. People are looking for that happiness, and we internalize it and we deliver on that in whatever we do. If we know that as an organization, and that is as powerful a piece as it is, then we absolutely have to integrate that into everything that we do. The creation of happiness has to be integrated into our processes, into the way we train our people, into the way we manage our people, into the way we manage experiences for our customers. Every detail has to be paid attention to in order for us to be very intentional about our response to that detail and keeping us ever focused on that creation of happiness. So to this day, that is our goal, is to create that happiness in the service experience. And there is a framework beginning with that common purpose of creating happiness. There is a framework of standards and behaviors that the Parks and Resorts division of the company, which is responsible for all of our parks around the world and all of our hotels and resorts around the world, is to keep everybody focused on that common purpose. And that's the goal of the culture. And it has to be integrated throughout every step in the cultural journey that our people take. At the end of the day, if you will, when we talk about financial results for your company, we have to be able to translate that customer experience into something that we can measure. And of course, that is financials at the end of the year, or whenever that is that we're measuring them. We measure them often. But it's the financials that aren't a direct result of the service being delivered, but they are a direct result of the loyalty that is created from the delivery of that service. And I can't overestimate enough for you the power of a customer service experience in driving loyalty. Whether that loyalty is getting someone to come back and revisit you and respend, as in vacations for us in Florida, or if that person is not coming back, it's the power of being able to recommend your brand to other people based on their experience. We have many, many families and many people who come to visit us once in their lifetime for a variety of reasons. But we want to ensure that when they walk away from that singular or single experience, that they walk away with the most positive response to that as possible, because they're going to be talking to people and they're going to be on social media recommending what they did and the things that they saw. So it's that intent to recommend and the intent to return for those that can, that drive the financial results. And both of those loyalty metrics are based on the quality of the service. As I said earlier, when you're a brand like Disney, there's an assumption that the quality of your product will always be there. So you have to live up to that. People aren't judging you on that. They're judging you really on the quality of their experience. So if we take this very important piece of service, customer service, and we put that at the center of everything that we do and every process that we engineer, we have to make sure that our delivery systems for the service are there to support it. And their service is primarily delivered in three ways. It's delivered through people, whether that's face-to-face interaction or voice-to-voice interaction. It's delivered through your environment, through your place. Those are all the pieces people see and listen to and smell and enjoy when they're actually in one of our parks around the world. And then there are the processes that surround your people practices and your place practices that drive that service. So we have to engineer this response to that service and keep it central in everything that we do. And Disney is not a perfect organization. I have, in doing this for 30 years, I have run across no perfect organizations. There are none. But what there are organizations that continually strive to do better with their customer services experiences, and they have to keep working on that on a daily basis. It's continuous improvement, if you will. It never stops. It's happening today on our sites around the world with our customers. We're continuously trying to correct the things that maybe didn't quite go so well today and make them go better tomorrow. And that's the whole goal. When you take your eye off that service or the quality of that service and think that you can just throw some training at it, or throw a short initiative at it and it will resolve itself and it will forever be good, that's a fallacy, because it cannot happen that way. It will fade away as soon as you take your intentionality away from it. As soon as you take your focus away from it, it will fade away. So it's an ongoing process to keep this service piece central. And we'll talk more about the people elements of that and the leadership elements of that.
So, Chris, based on what you're saying in the description of Disney's HR strategy, I'm presuming that Disney uses a shared services HR model. How does that model function at Disney, and what are the benefits of a shared services HR model?
Disney has used, and Parks and Resorts has used, a shared services model for a long time now. It is critical, especially with human resource function and the human resource continuum, that there be continuity with everything that we do from division to division, from business to business within parks and resorts. If you don't have the continuity with everybody on the same page, if you will, and heading in the same direction, then you open yourself up to a lot of siloing. You open yourself up to different units doing different things for different reasons. And all of that translates into an inconsistent experience, not only for your employees, but it translates into an inconsistent service experience for the people that you're serving, your customers. So for Disney, it has been critical, as I said, for a long time, to centralize all of those, many of those, if not all of those functions, those human resource functions, so that they all are moving to the same beat. They are all moving in the same direction. If correction occurs, correction happens across the entire system, and it's not a unit by unit, division by division piece of work, but a single piece of work that translates everywhere. So what does that look like for Disney in a shared services model, especially from a human resource strategic viewpoint and from a functional viewpoint, is that everything is centralized in a shared services model, beginning with recruitment by people who are interested in working for the company. So if we come all the way up to the front end of an entry process, if you will, for a new employee into the Disney organization, it begins the introduction to our culture, our service-centric culture, and this idea of purpose. It begins in the actual recruitment mechanisms that our marketers use to attract people to the organization. For us, culture has always been the most important thing, because if culture embodies your service promise, which of course is your brand promise for us, if it captures that, then we can get a much better fit with the individual who's looking to work for us and hire the best fit individuals to our culture. And this is something that I must say I struggled with, not from our standpoint, but with the clients that I worked with at Disney Institute. For many of them, they were very task focused. They were very job focused, so that when they started recruiting people to work for their organizations, they would recruit really on job or task proficiency, and they would look very little at cultural fit. And I was always trying to impress upon them that they may, in that process, end up hiring somebody that could certainly do the work, because there's always work to be done. But what kind of individual are they hiring into the company, their organization? What kind of individual are they allowing to impact the culture that they have? And that can be dangerous, because somebody who's very good at their task or very good at their job may not be very good at relationships or relating to other people or their coworkers or teamwork or any of those things that are critical for success. So you end up on one side hiring wonderful skill, perhaps, into your organization. I call it the golden resume, but you end up hiring somebody that's potentially can be damaging to your culture. And Disney has always, again, going back to the recruitment into the company, has always put the highest value on fit to culture before fit to job or fit to task. And that's not saying that the tasks aren't important or the jobs aren't important. They are, they're very important. But you have to have somebody that's focused on something more. And if they're very task focused, you will have sometimes more difficulty in aligning them to the purpose of your organization, the mission vision of your organization. You may have a more difficult time aligning them and getting them to fit into the organization. So that begins with Disney in the recruitment process. If you ever look at any of our marketing advertisements for coming to work for us, you'll see that it always begins with culture first. It has lots of cultural language about service and customers and enjoying your day and all of that at the front end. And then we get to the job and the tasks toward the back end of that recruitment. Already what we're trying to do is we're trying to filter individuals out of the process that may not be good fits for the process for us to have work for us. Once they get through that recruitment process and they do come to us and they apply, then there's a whole series of questions, and this is a whole mixture of online surveys and face-to-face interviews and all of those things to try to determine, again, continually, we haven't taken our eye off the ball, how do we continue to see or want to see a focus on the service piece? And we want that to come across in how we interact with that individual. It's only when we see a good fit to our culture and the potential to be able to do the job and perform the tasks, of course, will we make an offer of employment to that individual. It is critical for us to always stay aligned to this purpose. It's critical to stay aligned to the culture of Disney, and that will and has been for a very long time now, and I think will well into the future be the focus of hiring. Once that person is hired, then they are onboarded, and the first day of onboarding for them is global orientation. This is held, Disney University has its own freestanding structure. on the property in Orlando at Walt Disney World, and you will go to that first day of orientation with all those others that have been hired in the previous week or the previous month, whatever their cadence is, and you'll be onboarded to the culture. So this first touch point of orientation will always be focused on the service element of the work, on the culture of the Walt Disney Company, on our history, on the legacy of Walt Disney, on all of those things that are important for us and drive who we are, because we know that all the other things that a new employee may need to be oriented to, they can come later. They can come a week later, they can come a few days later, but the most important thing is orientation to the culture. And then after that, a succession of other orientations, depending on where you're going to work, now more getting into your job or the skills that we have hired you to perform. But nevertheless, there is that definite, intentional, consistent messaging about the kind of culture we have, your role as a new employee in that culture, and your responsibilities in that culture. So if we look at this from a shared services modeling, it would be difficult, very difficult, if not impossible for us to do this in such a large organization if we allowed a lot of these functions to take place within their individual business units without any oversight of the company at large, because we're trying to make sure that there's fit. And to do that, there needs to be consistency in the way we approach that fit, and we make sure that that person is continually aligning. That then goes into successive, depending on your role. If you're a leader, you go into some leadership development right away. If you're an employee that's working for us a long time, it may be cycling back through as part of your growth plan through the Disney University for professional development or skills development or whatever that looks like. But the Disney University is there to really oversee that whole process from orientation, global orientation, all the way through the life cycle of that particular employee. And it does that in concert with talent management and recruitment to make sure we're bringing in the right candidates to that culture on the front end so we can maintain some consistency. The last thing that we want to do is hire the wrong person, the wrong fit into the organization, and that person ends up leaving us because they don't have an affinity for our culture. They don't have an affinity for delivering the best service to their colleagues or to their customers. That only costs us money in the long run, because now we have to go back and we have to backfill those positions. So we want to make sure as closely as we can, as much as we can, to have that process all in check, all lined up, so that we are constantly teaching that service centricity and that cultural centricity to the people who come to work for us. And a shared services model is the best way of achieving that, especially in the Parks and Resorts division, where by far we are seeing the most customers or face-to-face or talking to the most customers voice-to-voice than any other division of the organization.
So Chris, I'm currently teaching a class here at Albany Law School called HR Strategic and Financial Planning and Assessment. And one of the key themes of our course that the readings and the lectures are talking about and the students are interested in is that HR leadership is so critical to ensure the long-term sustainability of that positive culture. You mentioned that it all stems from Walt Disney and his brilliance. But as you said, he's gone, and I think most of the Disney family, I don't think they're Disney relatives actively involved in leadership in the company now. So this selection of leadership is so important in impacting the overall business results year after year and decade after decade. Can you give us some insights on how Disney selects and develops and manages its leaders?
Yes, and this is the last element that really balances our scorecard, if you will. We started this hour by speaking about loyalty and the generation of loyalty. That loyalty being created by the service experience, the customer experience with our brand, that service experience being largely driven by the people element of the delivery framework, which is primarily people, whether that's face-to-face or voice-to-voice in the Parks and Resorts division. The final element is this leadership element, because without proper leadership, without inspired leadership who completely align to the company's thinking around culture and around service, without that, all of those other pieces of the chain or the scorecard begin to break down. Even with the most well-intentioned employees, let's say you're working in a unit where you have 20 employees working in a particular department or area, and they're reporting up to a single manager. If that manager has not internalized the goals of the organization, and they don't in turn give the opportunity to their team members and their staff members to participate in that vision, in that purpose, if they don't do that, then the employee experience starts to disintegrate. Because we know, and I think companies know this around the world, whether they articulate it or not, employees don't get up every day and decide to go to work because they want to do the same thing that they've been doing for the last 10 years, but now they're doing it again for the 4,000th time. That doesn't motivate employees. It doesn't motivate employees to come to work. What motivates employees is the ability, is the possibility of making a difference, not only with the work that they do, but in their relationship with the people that they're serving every day. And we know that's what feeds them. That's what feeds their soul, because that's what they want to do. That's the differentiator. It's not doing the same thing that I've been doing for 10 years. That's not the motivator. So I'd like to tell you a story that will take us back in our history, really to the time of Walt Disney, but really, I think the time of his death. Walt Disney died in 1966, a long time ago now. And when he died, his brother Roy, he only had a single brother, Roy took over because at the time we were building the Magic Kingdom in Florida at the Walt Disney World property. And Roy took over, and Roy completed really that project of building the Magic Kingdom. But the Magic Kingdom opened in October of 1971. And just 2 months later, in December, Roy died. So now the company is left without really a captain, if you will, of the ship, anybody running the ship. And there were no more Disney brothers left, or sisters for that matter. And the company went through a period from the time of Roy's death in 1971 until the early 1980s. The company went through a very rough period where it floundered. And those are my words, because it was not particularly creative during those years. It didn't particularly have a lot of vision about what it wanted to be or where it wanted to go. And that's because there was a whole succession of leaders, CEOs, that came through from 71 to the early 80s that didn't take the company really anywhere. And on top of that, the company was attempting to build its second theme park in Florida, which was Epcot. And in doing so, brought the company almost to the brink of bankruptcy. And I mention this because it's a critical point in our story. The company was literally on the brink of corporate takeover by raiders. Excuse me, by raiders. The company would have been bought, and I always equate this to the fate of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer Studios, that met the same fate. They were bought up when they were weak, at their weakest, and they were pieced out and parceled out. And that was the fear for Disney in the early 1980s. And Walt's nephew stepped up and said, we need to bring some financial structure back to the organization so that we can make ourselves stronger. We can protect ourselves from any potential takeovers. And that's exactly what they did. They brought in a gentleman by the name of Michael Eisner in the early 1980s. Michael came from Paramount Studios in California, and he came to Disney and did what he had always done the best. He created film. And this period of the mid to late 80s, even the early 90s, was a renaissance period in Disney's animation unit, in Disney's filmmaking unit, and not only a renaissance, but a successful renaissance. So Michael did what any leader would need to do, try to bring back some financial stability to a company that was failing. And he did. He made it strong financially, very, very much so. And he did that in a short period of time. And we entered the 90s, and this is when I was first beginning with the company, really the end of the 80s into the 90s. And we called the 90s the Disney decade because we were building, we were expanding, the company was diversifying across so many different fronts. It was really a decade of growth for the Disney organization. And we started seeing, though, in the midst of all that growth, we started seeing the customer metrics, the customer service metrics begin to fail. And we didn't quite understand this. And we thought, well, how can this be happening when we, at least on the surface, we are financially very successful, we're moving into different areas. But all the same, Michael said, we need to look at this. And he had one of his vice presidents take over that task. His name was Judson Green. And Judson started to dive into the reasons for this failing customer service arena. And what he discovered was the customer service experience was failing because the employee experience was failing. And those two things are inextricably linked to one another. The quality of your employee experience will always be reflected in the quality or non-quality of your experience that you have with your customers. So we dug around into that a little bit deeper and discovered that our leadership ranks, we come back to this leadership piece being the primary driver of that chain. The leadership experience was not where we needed it to be. We had leaders that were very, very good at productivity, but not so good at running teams. And this was pervasive. So we went through a period of correction in the mid 1990s, which was this program was called Performance Excellence. And it really wasn't a program, it was a new way of thinking where we had to go back and we had to say, as an organization, we need to focus once again, not only on the quality of the individual that we're hiring around productivity and getting business results, but we also have to have a keen eye on their fit to our culture, their values alignment to our culture. And so this performance excellence process meant to balance these two things again, culture and productivity, into a system where we could start holding leaders accountable, and that wasn't a skewed system or management system one way or the other. And that meant for us, on a very large scale, a whole re-education process for our leaders, a whole refocusing of our leaders on what was important for the company. And we ended up losing a great many leaders during this period. But if we let it go as it was going, the company eventually would fail again because the customer experience was already failing, and we were seeing that in the metrics. So this correction went through in the early 90s, mid 90s, and to this day, the company balances in its leadership ranks those two things. Fit to culture, balance to culture, which is everything about behavior and service and taking care of my team, to the productivity side, which is about getting the work done, bringing in your financials, and doing all that which is necessary for running your business. But one could not be overtaking the other. So to this day, our talent management system is focused on trying to, and it's an ongoing effort between leaders and their leaders every year, balancing these two things. Now, having said that, now we go back into the process again of how we bring leaders on board. If we know that these two things are critical for a leader's success in our organization, and not only their success, but the success of their team that's going to reporting to them, then we need to make sure that we're selecting those new leaders or promoting those new leaders very, very carefully. Because if we make a misstep here and we hire somebody who's far too focused on productivity and not focused enough on cultural fit and cultural, if you will, sustainability, then we are in trouble once again. So we hire and we promote based on that balance. And I will tell you that Disney is one of those organizations, because culture is such an important aspect to working at Disney, we do primarily most of our leadership promotions come from within. We hire from the outside occasionally, it happens, but we find that when we promote from within, the people from within already have the culture piece, and then it may be just a skills issue, and we may have to do some upskilling. But I will tell you, as spending almost a lifetime in training and development, it's far easier to upskill someone on a job function or things that are required of their role. It's far easier to do that than try to change somebody's attitude, try to make somebody positive that's negative. Those things you almost never have success in doing. So it's critical that we have that balance. So we hire or promote for that. And then going back to the Disney University, they go through a regimen of courses and trainings that will give them a foundation for being a leader within the Walt Disney Company. And everybody goes through that. It's a requirement of all new leaders or managers in the company, whether you're brand new from the outside and you have 30 years of experience, or you're a newly promoted frontline leader in our company who's taking on a managerial position for the first time. Everybody is onboarded to the same curriculum so that we have consistency and we know what people have been exposed to and what they've been trained in. Again, from a shared services perspective, it's far easier to do that when you have a learning and development organization that's managing all of that. It's consistent for everyone than a very non-centralized organization, especially one of our size. And then you have everybody in every different area doing things a little bit differently. That is a recipe for chaos eventually, and it's certainly not a recipe for consistency and especially adherence to culture or values alignment to your culture. So I tell you all of this and with about these leaders and how we continually develop them, and through this development and selection, because they are really the linchpins to make the rest of it work. In our own lessons from the 1990s, if we don't keep a keen eye on that and we let that get away from us again, then we risk getting back to the situation we were in the early 90s, where our employee experiences begin to fail and our customer experiences begin to fail. It's commonly known that employees, when they leave an organization and they go to another organization, that they don't leave organizations. Employees leave ineffective or bad leadership or management. That's what they run away from. And if we allow poor leaders or ineffective leaders to chase people away, then human resources is constantly backfilling all of those positions, which costs a fortune. It costs a lot in the long run, especially when you're running thousands of positions open on a regular day, as Walt Disney World in Florida is doing. So it's about all that alignment and how that fits into the strategy of the company being successful. It knows that its success is in its people. And if it keeps aligning to those people, then those people will make all the difference for the customers. And the customers are what drive the bottom line.
So Chris, you mentioned in your remarks when Disney noticed some of the metrics were falling and were doing a diagnostic. And I think everybody will recognize that the old HR strategy around that was to just throw some training at it and hope for the best. And Disney, as you have described with the Disney University, has a very different, very strategic approach to that. But at the same time, and I'm sure people are asking, well, that's pretty expensive. It costs a lot of money to have that kind of highly developed and operationalized learning and development function. So let's talk about ROI, return on investment. How does Disney justify those HR costs to the finance people?
What's interesting to me is that, and I ran across this with many of my clients as I worked with them in Disney Institute, is that when things got rough for an individual or a company or an organization, or we were going through a downturn in the economy, that most of them, not all of them, but most of them would start cutting costs within the organization to be able to survive whatever it was that was happening, downturn in the economy, whatever that was. And what I always found interesting and almost predictable was that they would start cutting away at all their training. They would start cutting away at all their development. So in some cases, it would go completely away. All of their training would go away. Their onboarding, their orientation processes would become a fraction of what they used to be because the shorter, the more inexpensive they were to conduct. And I always questioned them, and I always said, I understand why you're doing this because this seems like an easy way for you to save money. But what happens when the economy comes back? What happens when you get through this downturn? Where are you now? You have a team of people who you haven't developed. You have a team of people who haven't been onboarded correctly, or oriented correctly, or trained correctly. And I said, now you have to go back and you have to correct all of that damage. And it's damage. It actually is damage that was done. And I confronted them with this because it got them to think about their decision making when things weren't so good, when they felt like this was the easiest area to get rid of. It is expensive. Having the high intentionality that Disney has around recruiting and hiring and onboarding and training costs money. But if you don't make the investment, and you don't make the investment even when times are difficult, you continue to make every attempt to make that investment. If you don't do that, when the storm passes, you're left to pick up the pieces. And sometimes that's a brutal place to be in an organization because the organization often is in chaos at the end of one of these periods. And they haven't prepared themselves or even tried to prepare themselves to prevent that from happening. So yes, it is a very expensive proposition, but I would encourage anyone to think about not only the money you're saving today, but what about everything that you're losing for tomorrow by not having a robust system of learning and development. It's critical for the sustainability of your organization to make sure that you stay as close as you can to a continuity, not only for the people working for you, but for the new people coming in and the training you're giving them and the orientations that you're giving them. Stay as close to that continuity as possible. Because without that, then at some point when the storm does go by, you're going to be picking up the pieces. And sometimes it takes a very long time to get to where you were before. And in the process, you've lost a great many people, a very good people that you could have maintained and you could have sustained through this.
So as we wind up close to 2 o'clock, let me ask you one last question. We were speaking a little bit before the webinar started, and you mentioned that Disney now has employee or potential employees, applicants that show up and don't realize that Walt Disney was an actual real person. They know the name Disney, they grew up with it, Their parents, grandparents probably grew up with it, but they don't realize that Walt Disney was a real person. So speak just briefly in the couple of minutes that we have left about Disney's legacy, and in your opinion, if Walt Disney came back today and looked at this organization, would he be happy?
Interesting question. I think we certainly we continue to live Walt Disney's legacy. As I said earlier, he's been gone since 1966. But what he gave us was a foundation of thought, a foundation of cultural thought, a foundation of focus on service that we still have today. It is, the very first words that I said as we began today were about going back to things that were foundational. And because they were foundational, they were in a sense timeless. And I think that's what Walt Disney left us. He left us with a timeless foundation that doesn't change. Now, how we respond to it absolutely changes. Walt Disney, if he were to come to life today, he wouldn't recognize the organization from a growth standpoint, but I think he would also be very proud of where we are with our service delivery and the things we focus on that he left us. It's important to know, and I always have told my clients this, it's very easy to think that the solutions that you're seeking in your own organization, it's very easy to think that they have to be complex and they have to be very detail oriented, but in almost in a minutia way in order for you to be better long term. And I will tell you, having lived in the Disney organization for so many decades, that the simplicity is really what is key. It is in the simplicity that every person at Walt Disney World today in Florida is trying to deliver on a service promise to the customer. It is with the simplicity of thought around vision and mission and values and all of that which drives us. It doesn't have to be a complex response. It can be a very simple response. But as we always used to say, simple does not mean easy. It's still difficult. You have to work at it every day, as Walt Disney had to work at it every single day. We continue that legacy to today, and it remains very much a part of, as I say, the DNA of the Disney organization and the DNA of every individual like me who's worked for that organization and internalized the thought and the intentionality and the beauty around that intentionality.
Well, that's a wonderful way to close, and I think you're right that if Disney came back today, if Walt Disney came back, he would be thrilled and overjoyed, and he certainly would recognize everything that is going on. Let's turn it back to Tom Rosenberger to close us out.
Thank you very much, James. And Chris, this has been a fascinating look into the organization. I think our attendees are perhaps walking away with a ton of nuggets of insight that they can then take and try to figure out how to adapt to their organizational context. So thank you very much. And on behalf of Albany Law School, the leadership, the staff, thank you to Nicole for helping out today as well, and our partners. We really appreciate both of you and your effort you have put into this. To our attendees, please don't forget to make use of the survey that you're going to see pop up once I end the webinar. We do like to use your feedback, not only to refine our programming, but really just to know what you're interested in the future. So we plan these events around what folks like you tell us. And just a reminder, we'll be sending out the professional development certificates along with a recording link from today's webinar in the near future. For now, this concludes our event. Please stay in touch and have a wonderful afternoon, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.